The sky over the moon's far side was a forever black, speckled with stars that never twinkled. Here, in the silent cold, the great dishes of Project Cosmic Ear listened. They did not listen for little green men. They listened for the universe's background hum, the static of creation itself. Dr. Park Minji, her breath a steady cloud in her helmet's light, ran a gloved hand over a support beam. It was cold enough to freeze skin. Perfect. The silence was what they needed. Back inside the main habitat, the air was warm and smelled of recycled oxygen and coffee. Screens covered the walls, showing complex waves of data. Lee Tae-seok, an engineer who could talk to machines better than people, was elbow deep in an open server rack. His fingers moved with quick, sure motions. "It's not noise," he said, not looking up. "I'm telling you, Minji, the pattern is too clean. It's in the quantum flutter of the background radiation. It's a signal riding a gravity wave." Minji took off her helmet, her dark hair sticking to her forehead. 100 years of SETI, Tae-seok. We found ComSats and cosmic microwave leftovers. You think we just found aliens because of a quantum flutter? I think, he said, finally looking at her, his eyes tired but bright. We've been looking for a radio shout in a room where everyone is using fiber optics. We just plugged into the cable. For 3 days and nights, they did not sleep. The array had captured a stream of data, a repeating packet of information so complex it made their most powerful decryption A is grown. But it was not encrypted. That was the second shock. It was a public feed, broadcast for anyone with the right ears to hear. The right ears, it seemed, were not Human. The translation software, fed with the mathematical base code of the universe, finally began to spit out words and images. In the main lab in Daedeok, South Korea, the rest of the team gathered. There was Kim Ji-soo, the young linguist who had built the translation matrix, and Park Jun, the exobiologist. They watched the main screen, a silent, terrified audience. The first images were beautiful. Cities of light on worlds with triple suns. Ships that looked like living crystal moving through nebulae. A marketplace with 1,000 different shapes of life trading glowing artifacts. It was a bustling, living, galactic community. Ji-soo read the text crawling beside the images. Welcome to the Galactic Consensus Public Information Stream, a curated feed from member species and prospective civilizations. A cheer started in June's throat, but died when the feed changed. The next segment was titled Assessment Logs, Sol System, Third Planet. The beautiful aliens were gone. Now, the screen showed human cities. It showed traffic jams in Seoul, crowds in Mumbai, farming in the Midwest. Then it showed other things. Old footage from World War II, the rubble of Syria, the burning Amazon, a political protest turning into a riot. Each clip was short, clinical, labeled. Subject species, Homo sapiens sapiens. Designation, potential, Tier 3, a soft, androgynous voice said. The voice held no malice. It was the tone of a scientist describing an interesting but dangerous insect. Observations indicate rapid technological acceleration paired with profound psychological instability. The species exhibits chronic internal conflict, hierarchical violence, and resource mismanagement driven by non-logical belief systems and amplified emotional responses. Minji felt her face grow hot. They're judging our entire history by our worst moments. It gets worse, Tae-seok said, his voice flat. The feed continued. Primary species trauma is evident. A pervasive fear of scarcity and a documented propensity for tribalism override cooperative logic. Note the persistent cultural artifacts of heroic individualism and sacrificial defiance, which further destabilize social cohesion. On screen, they showed a clip from an old movie, a hero standing against an army. They showed a statue of a soldier raising a flag. They showed a firefighter running into a falling building. The consensus saw these not as courage, but as sickness. Their development of nuclear fission and rudimentary absent emotional maturity presents a significant local contamination risk, the voice stated. A graph appeared, showing a timeline. Passive observation protocol enacted. Containment via controlled misinformation to discredit and fragment any unifying proof of extraterrestrial intelligence is advised. June slammed his hand on the table. The UFOs? The sightings? The crazy stories governments deny? That's them? They're making us look insane to keep us quiet? The final verdict appeared in clear, bold text on the screen. Conclusion. Species presents high volatility, low stability. Quarantine recommended. Re-evaluation no sooner than 1,200 standard cycles from current date. Contact forbiddens. Upgrade to post-potential status, likely upon first deep space conflict. The screen went back to the beautiful, glittering images of the galactic consensus. A commercial for some kind of starliner played, showing happy aliens of different shapes looking out a viewport at a nebula. The lab was utterly silent. The coffee was cold. The hum of the computers sounded like a mocking laugh. Minji stared at the screen, but she didn't see the aliens. She saw the eyes of the soldier in their footage, the soot on the firefighter's face, the determined hope of a protester. She saw humanity's struggle, our endless, painful, beautiful fight to be better than we were yesterday. Our love for our children that made us build shelters. Our grief for our planet that made some of us try to save it. Our anger at injustice that made us march. They saw all that too. And they called it a disease. Taeseok was the one who broke the silence. He wasn't looking at the screen of stars. He was looking at a smaller screen, at the raw code of the broadcast. They see our fire, he said, his voice quiet but hard. They don't understand it, so they want to let it go out. He turned to Minji. They think our fury is our weakness. Minji finally looked away from the screen. She met his gaze. In his eyes, she saw the same cold, clarifying anger that was settling in her own heart. It wasn't a hot rage. It was something deeper, heavier. It was the weight of a truth too big to scream about. No, she said, her voice barely a whisper in the quiet room. It's not our weakness, Taeseok. She looked back at the screen, at the glittering, peaceful, logical galaxy that had just sentenced them to a silent cage. It's what they should fear the most, and they don't even know it yet. The world did not end with a shout, but with a secret. In secure rooms under capitals and within mountain bunkers, leaders watched the same footage from the moon. The shock was a physical thing, a punch to the gut of the whole species. Then came the quiet, a strange, heavy quiet. Publicly, nothing changed. The sun rose. People went to work. Traffic filled the streets. But in those hidden rooms, the silence was full of a terrible understanding. Humanity had been judged, found wanting, and filed away. The anger was there, a deep, cold current beneath the calm. But so was a new, fragile unity. For the first time in history, every nation, every faction, faced a single, undeniable truth. They were all in the zoo together. Project Cosmic Ear was taken over by a new global effort. It had no public name. Its funding came from black budgets and redirected resources. Its personnel were the best minds from every corner of Earth, all sworn to a silence deeper than space. Minji and Taeseok stayed at the heart of it, their lab in Daebeek becoming a nerve center. Their new task was not just to listen, but to study. The galactic broadcast was a fire hose of information. They learned the rules of the universe the hard way by watching a game everyone else was already playing. They learned about gravity drives, about energy shields, about the materials that made up starship hulls. They also learned about the galactic consensus itself. It was not an empire. It was a club. A club for species that had, in its view, outgrown their childish passions. Weeks turned into a tense month. Then, the analysts found a new data packet in the stream. It was labeled Xenocultural Analysis. Case Study 4491, the oculi of Oculus Prime. The mood in the Daydeek lab was different that day. There was a horrible curiosity. This was the first look at how the consensus treated a species it liked. The screen showed a world of breathtaking beauty. Oculus Prime was a marble of deep blue and swirling white. Its continents were small, lush islands in an endless ocean. The oculi appeared. They were graceful, long-limbed beings with large, dark eyes and skin that shimmered with soft, internal light. They communicated not with sound, but with complex patterns of color that danced across their faces and hands. A silent, beautiful language of emotion. The oculi, a gentle, scholarly alien voice narrated, represent a zenith of peaceful development. Their telepathic emotive connection fosters a society without conflict, without hierarchy. Their integration into the galactic consensus, 207 standard cycles ago, is considered a model of successful first contact. The footage showed oculi gliding through crystalline cities, their light patterns mingling in harmonious rainbows. They worked with consensus scientists, their gentle minds helping to grow amazing biotechnologies. They were happy. They were safe. This, said Kim Ji-soo, the linguist, a small smile touching her lips. This is what they want. This is what we are not. Tae-seok frowned, his arms crossed. It's too clean. Like a picture. There's no friction. The video continued. The scene shifted. The colors turned grim. A new planet appeared, this one gray and rugged, like a scarred fist. Containment breach log. Piracy in Sector 47 Gamma. Species Krath. The Krath were reptilian, with sharp angles and eyes like black stones. They moved with a quick, aggressive purpose. The narration turned cold. The Krath were denied consensus membership due to unacceptably high levels of territorial aggression and a rigid pack hierarchy. Their reaction was predictable violence. Security footage showed Krath raiders attacking a small consensus trading outpost. They were brutal, efficient, and fearless. Current intelligence, the voice stated, indicates a Krath raiding party is moving through this sector. Their resources are depleted. Projected target for resupply. A map appeared. A line stretched from the gray planet to the beautiful blue marble. Oculus Prime. An ice-cold dread filled the lab. Minji leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the console. No, they wouldn't. The feed split. On one side, the gentle, glowing oculi went about their peaceful lives unaware. On the other, a command center of the Galactic Consensus Defense Fleet. The beings there were insect-like, with multifaceted eyes and calm, clicking voices. They analyzed data. Defense of Oculus Prime is tactically suboptimal, a clicking commander said. The Krath rating pattern is erratic. Probability of intercept before they reach the atmosphere is less than 40%. A second insectoid alien added data to a screen. Additional risk. The oculi possess natural neural telepathy. If the Krath were to capture and analyze oculi biology, the probability of them weaponizing this empathy-disrupting capability is calculated at 38%. This presents a future threat to consensus stability. The head commander tapped a long, thin finger on the display. 38%. Unacceptable risk. There was no anger in its voice. No sadness. It was the tone of a man deciding to delete a corrupted file to save the computer. Issue the order. Preemptive planetary sterilization. Preserve the greater harmony. In the lab, June, The exobiologist whispered, "They can't mean." On the screen, a single consensus battleship, sleek and silent, moved into position. It did not fire a barrage of missiles. It did not send troops. A single focused beam of pure energy, brighter than a star, lanced down from its hull. It touched the atmosphere of Oculus Prime. The beautiful blue and white marble did not explode. It changed. The white clouds turned into a boiling global hurricane of superheated steam. The blue oceans flashed into vapor. The light of the oculi, every shimmering, colorful, gentle light, was swallowed by a blinding white glare. Then the glare faded. What was left was a dead, brown rock, glowing faintly with heat. The Krath raiding party, seeing their target gone, adjusted their course and moved on to find easier prey. The galactic feed returned to the scholarly narrator. The being's face was serene. A necessary action. The greater harmony is preserved. The oculi's contribution to the consensus will be missed. The feed then smoothly transitioned to a report on new agricultural techniques, but in the Daedeke lab, the silence was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Jisoo was crying without a sound, tears streaming down her face. June had turned away from the screen, his body rigid. Oak stood perfectly still, his face pale, his eyes locked on the image of the dead world. He looked like a man who had just seen a fundamental law of the universe. Break.min-g did not cry. She felt a coldness spread from her chest out to her fingers and toes. She saw the gentle light of the oculi go out. She saw the calm, logical faces of the insects who gave the order. And she understood. This was the universe. This was the logic of the strong, the calm, the superior. Her stomach twisted. She stumbled to a waste bin and vomited, her body reacting to a soul-deep sickness. When she stood up, wiping her mouth, her face was not full of grief. It was set in hard, cold lines. Tae-seok finally moved. He walked to the main screen, which now showed a happy commercial for alien food paste. He placed his hand on the cool gloss, right over the spot where Oculus Prime had been. Necessary? He repeated the alien word, his voice a low, dangerous rasp. He turned to look at Minji, at the others. In his eyes, the last spark of hopeful curiosity was gone, replaced by a dark, flat understanding. They see life as a number, a percentage. We are a bad number, Minji. A decimal point to be rounded off. He took a deep, shaky breath. They just showed us exactly what they have planned for us when they decide the time is right. The quiet that fell over Earth was not a peaceful one. It was the quiet of a deep, dark ocean, hiding currents of terrible strength beneath a still surface. There were no leaks, no panic in the streets. The leaders of the world held the secret close, a shared burden that crushed old rivalries into dust. The only thing that mattered now was the undeniable truth on the screen. The universe was not a friendly place, and humanity's seat at the table would not be given. It would have to be taken. A single unified command structure was formed. They called it the Terran Strategic Directorate. Its first and only project was given a simple, ominous name, Gwang-Yeo. It was a Korean word. It meant wilderness, the place you go through, tested and hardened, to reach a promised land, or the place where you dig in for a final stand. Minji and Tae-seok were summoned from Daedeke. They were flown in a quiet, windowless aircraft to a place that did not exist on any map. It was a facility buried deep under the rocky soil of the Gobi Desert. The elevator ride down took 3 minutes. The complex was a maze of concrete, steel, and frantic activity. Scientists, engineers, and military planners from every nation moved with a shared, grim focus. They were taken to a secure briefing room. A general from a country Minji did not recognize stood before them. His face was lined, his eyes tired but sharp. "You have seen the enemy's strength," the general said, his voice echoing in the bare room. "Their technology is centuries, perhaps millennia, ahead of ours. Their resources are the resources of a galaxy. A direct fight is suicide. They would erase us as easily as they erased the oculi." He paused, looking at each of them. "But they made a mistake. They showed us their mind. They showed us that they think in logic, in calculations, in probabilities. Our mandate is not to match their power. Our mandate is to break their logic. Find a weapon that makes their calculations fail. Find a weapon that uses what they have against them." Awoke was assigned to a team of engineers and physicists. Their task: study the broadcast's technology, not to copy it, but to find a crack in it. They pored over the sensor logs of the sterilization of Oculus Prime. They analyzed the energy signatures of consensus ships. "Their shields are perfect," a Russian engineer said one day, throwing a datapad on a table in frustration. "They dampen kinetic energy. They diffuse plasma. They bend electromagnetic radiation. It is like a wall. We cannot build a bigger hammer." Awoke had not slept in 2 days. He stared at the screen, not at the shield schematics, but at the carrier wave analysis of the galactic broadcast itself. The signal that brought them the news. The signal that was meant to be invisible to them. "A wall," Awoke mumbled. His voice was rough. "Yes, a wall against things, against energy, against matter." He stood up, his chair scraping back. "What is their broadcast? It is not energy they are worried about. It is information. They send it on a gravity wave carrier. Their shields? Do they shield against gravity?" The room went still. They checked. The consensus shields were optimized against weapons. A gravity wave, especially a subtle, coherent one like a communication stream, would pass right through. It was like a mail slot in a castle wall. "We cannot build a gravity cannon big enough to hurt them," the Russian said. "We don't need to hurt the ship," Awoke said, his mind racing down a dark new path. "We need to hurt the minds inside it. We send a signal, not a friendly hello, a scream, on their own mail slot." The concept was born, the resonance echo projector. It was not a bomb. It was a broadcaster. It would use stolen consensus carrier wave technology to punch a signal through their shields, directly into the heart of their ships, their hubs, their minds. Meanwhile, Minji was given a harder task. A terrible task. She led a team of psychologists, neurologists, and network specialists. Their goal: to build the message. The scream. "They dismissed our emotions as a flaw," Minji told her team. Her face was pale but calm. "They called our fury instability, our grief trauma, our love irrational attachment. So we will show them. We will weaponize the flaw." They called it soul sampling. It was controversial, horrifying, but no one objected for long. They all remembered the boiling oceans of Oculus Prime. They did not create a synthetic emotion. Instead, they tapped into the global neural network. The internet, communication satellites, even encrypted military channels, all of it carried the digital echo of human feeling. With a new, subtle, and powerful AI, they began to harvest. They collected the raw, unfiltered data of a species that had just been sentenced to death. They took the silent, cold fury of a mother who saw the oculi die and thought of her own child. They took the burning shame of a soldier who realized his entire life's purpose had been judged as a sickness. They took the crushing, universal grief for a gentle people they never knew, a grief that felt like a shared loss for their own future. They took more. They dove deeper into the human psyche. They sampled the terror of a child in a basement during an air raid, the desperate, long-burning hope of a protester facing down tanks, the stubborn, illogical joy of a birthday party in a refugee camp, the bitter taste of betrayal, the warm, solid feeling of a hand held in the dark, the pure, white-hot rage of injustice. It was not one feeling. It was all of them. A tidal wave of human experience, the beautiful and the ugly, the noble and the selfish, the full, shocking, glorious, and terrifying truth of being alive and caring in a universe that wanted you to be quiet and logical. Minji's team had to design containment for it, encoding protocols to keep the raw data from driving their own technicians mad. She listened to samples with headphones, her face often wet with tears, her hands sometimes shaking. She heard the sound of 1,000,000 hearts breaking, and 1,000,000 more refusing to stay broken. One night, Tae-seok found her in a small, dark observation room, looking at nothing. "We are making a monster," she said, her voice hollow. "No," Tae-seok said, sitting beside her. He looked older. They all did. "We are taking the monster they see when they look at us, and we are letting it out of the cage. We are showing them its real face." He showed her his work. On a tablet, he had a schematic. It showed a sleek, human-designed vessel. It had only one real weapon, a massive focused array where a cannon would normally be. It was designed to do one thing: hit close and broadcast. "The signal will be a concentrated pulse," he explained. "It will carry everything you are collecting. It will not argue with their logic. It will not fight their shields. It will bypass everything and make them feel the cost of their logic. It will make them feel the boiling of the oculi seas. It will make them feel our fear, our love, our rage, all at once." Minji looked from the schematic to Tae-seok's exhausted, determined face. The cold knot in her stomach began to warm, not with comfort, but with a fierce, defiant heat. They were not building a better gun. They were building a mirror to show the cold, logical gods of the galaxy the terrifying, beautiful, and furious thing they had tried to lock away. She nodded slowly. "They think our fire is a flaw to be extinguished," she whispered. Tae-seok finished the thought, his voice as hard as the desert rock above them. "So we will show them a wildfire." The ship did not look like a weapon. It was called the Gwang-Yeo one, but the crew called it the Vindicator. It was long and sleek, its hull a non-reflective black that drank in light. Its engine was a stolen secret, a gravity drive built from schematics pulled from the broadcast. It hummed with a sound that was more a vibration in the bones than a noise in the ears. Inside, it was cold and quiet. The crew was 10 men and women. They were not soldiers in the old sense. They were pilots, engineers, and specialists in the new, strange science of the resonance projector. They had all volunteered. They had all undergone months of brutal neural conditioning. Doctors had wired and dampened parts of their brains, building mental shields to protect them from the very weapon they carried. They walked like ghosts, their faces calm, but their eyes holding a distant, heavy knowledge. They knew they might not come back. They knew they might come back broken. Their commander was Captain Yoon Soo-jin. She was a former test pilot for deep space prototypes. She sat in the command chair, her hands resting on the armrests. She did not fidget. On her screen was the mission path, a silent run out of the solar system, skirting the edge of the quarantine zone the consensus had placed around humanity. Their target was not a ship or a planet. It was a relay. The main galactic consensus communications hub, a massive ring-shaped station near the galactic core. It was the heart from which the broadcast flowed, the source of the quiet voice that had judged them. The consensus monitors for energy signatures, for mass, for weapons fire, Tae-seok had told them in the final briefing. His face was on a screen in their ready room. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. They do not monitor for a single quiet ship using their own gravity drive harmonics. You will be a shadow. You will not exist until you want to be seen. The Vindicator slipped past the edge of the solar system like a knife through a curtain. The stars outside were different here, brighter, in patterns no human had ever seen from Earth. There was no beautiful music, just the hum of the drive and the beating of 10 human hearts. The journey took weeks. They passed consensus shipping lanes, seeing the glittering ships of 100 species moving like fish in a calm sea. They were so close and yet utterly invisible. It was a lonely, terrifying feeling. Finally, the hub appeared on the long-range scanner. It was immense, a ring of silver and light spinning slowly in the void. Smaller ships, like gnats, flew around it. Traffic control signals flashed, a peaceful, orderly dance. "The projector is ready, Captain," said her tactical officer, Lee Ji-hoon. His voice was flat, controlled by his conditioning. "Neural dampeners for the crew are at maximum. The payload is queued." Captain Yoon took a slow breath. The air in the ship tasted of metal and recycled oxygen. "Take us to the broadcast coordinates. Steady and slow. Do not power any defensive systems. Do not answer hails." The Vindicator moved forward, a tiny black sliver against the massive glowing ring. It was so small, so foolish. Like a mouse walking into a lion's den, they were halfway to the perfect broadcast point when a ship detached from the hub. It was a consensus peacekeeper vessel. It was shaped like a graceful, sharp leaf. It moved to intercept, its path smooth and efficient. A signal washed over the Vindicator. "Unidentified vessel. You are in a restricted traffic lane. Your drive signature is non-standard. Power down your engines and prepare for guidance and inspection." The voice was translated by their computers. It was calm. Bored even, the Vindicator did not change course. It did not slow. "Unidentified vessel. This is your second warning. Power down. Your actions are illogical and will be met with force." Captain Yoon looked at the peacekeeper on her screen. It was a beautiful, deadly thing. It represented everything that had sterilized Oculus Prime, everything that had put humanity in a box. She felt no hot anger, only a cold, clear purpose. "Broadcast point in 30 seconds, Ji-hoon said. The peacekeeper ship shimmered. A weapon port opened on its hull, glowing with a soft blue light. "Final warning. Power down or be neutralized. 10 seconds. All hands," Captain Yoon said, her voice calm in the quiet ship. "Brace for neural feedback. Remember why we are here. 5 seconds." The peacekeeper fired. A lance of blue energy, clean and precise, streaked toward the Vindicator. It would vaporize the ship. It was a logical action. At the same moment, the resonance echo projector activated. There was no flash of light, no shockwave, no sound. To an outside observer, nothing happened. The blue energy bolt simply winked out halfway to its target, dissipated by a localized gravity shear from the projector's wake. But inside the peacekeeper ship, and across the vast, open channels of the hub, a silent storm hit. It was not data. It was not a code. It was the soul of a species, weaponized. Into the orderly, logical minds of the consensus beings crashed a hurricane of feeling. The bridge crew of the peacekeeper saw nothing, but they felt everything. They felt the searing, dry-mouthed terror of a child hiding from bombs. They felt the back-breaking grief of a father holding a lifeless body. They felt the hot, blinding rage of a people told they were a disease. They felt the stubborn, illogical warmth of love for a homeworld, for a family, for a future stolen. They felt the boiling of Oculus Prime's oceans, not as a tactical report, but as the agony of a billion gentle minds snuffed out in an instant. It was too much. Too bright, too loud, too real. Their minds, built for logic and calm analysis, had no defenses. The emotional feedback was instantaneous. The insectoid commander clutched its head, its multifaceted eyes, seeing not the bridge, but a screaming human face. Its logic centers shattered under the weight of pure, irrational pain. Alarms blared as systems, tied to the crew's neural interfaces, went wild. The beautiful ship spun slowly, dead in space. Across the hub, chaos erupted. The hub was a center for communication, full of empathic and telepathic species. The resonance pulse hit them like a physical blow. Orderly data streams dissolved into raw, screaming emotion. Pleasure centers overloaded. Fear centers burned out. The beautiful, harmonious dance of the traffic control signals turned into a spasming, chaotic mess of ships jerking away, crashing into docking bays, broadcasting pure, unthinking panic on all frequencies. Inside the Vindicator, the crew groaned. Even with their dampeners, the echo of the weapon was a pressure in their skulls, a taste of copper and salt in their mouths. Captain Yoon blinked back tears that were not her own, her hands gripping the chair to stop the shaking. On her screen, she saw the results. The Peacekeeper was dark. The hub was a Christmas tree of malfunction lights, its perfect order broken. She looked at Ji-hoon. His nose was bleeding a little, but he gave her a slow, grim nod. Broadcast complete. Payload delivered. The Vindicator hung in the silent space. No other ships moved to attack. The weapon had not broken metal. It had broken an idea. The idea that emotion was weak. The idea that logic could not be touched. They had just touched it. They had just made the calm, superior gods of the galaxy feel. Captain Yoon looked at the chaotic, beautiful, terrible ring of the hub. "Hold position," she said, her voice rough. "Now we wait for their answer." The silence that followed was not the silence of space. It was a new kind of quiet, thick and stunned. The great galactic hub, a ring of silver light for millennia, was a mess. Lights flickered erratically. A few small ships drifted, uncontrolled. The usual flow of peaceful data was gone, replaced by a tangled scream of panic, pain, and confusion bleeding across every channel. It was the sound of a calm mind having its first, searing nightmare. The Vindicator floated, a small, dark stone in a stream that had suddenly stopped flowing. No other Peacekeeper ships moved to intercept. The weapon had not created a crater. It had created a question so huge, froze the galaxy's logic in its tracks. On Earth, in the buried Gobi facility, the mood was one of breathless, painful tension. Minji, Tae-seok, and the other members of Project Gwanggyo watched the data feed from the Vindicator. They saw the hub's chaos. They saw the single, dead Peacekeeper ship. They saw no further attacks. "They are recalculating," Tae-seok said, his voice a dry whisper. He had not slept. No one had. Minutes ticked by. Each one felt like an hour. Then a new signal arrived. It was not on the general broadcast band. It was a tight, focused beam, directed straight at the Vindicator. It was a request for a direct, secure channel. Captain Yoon, her head still throbbing from the neural feedback, looked at the message. It was simple. Origin. Consensus High Command. Request. Parley. She glanced at her crew. Their faces were pale, their eyes haunted, but they nodded. "Open the channel," Yoon said. Audio and visual. The main screen flickered. The being that appeared was not insectoid. It was humanoid, with smooth gray skin and large, dark eyes. But its face, usually a mask of serene intelligence, was strained. There were subtle tremors at the corners of its mouth. It had felt the echo. "I am Emissary VOR, it said. Its translated voice was still calm, but underneath there was a new tone. Something like, "Shock, your action defies categorization." Captain Yoon kept her own voice level, despite the pounding in her skull. "Observation is not defiance. We simply reflected what was already there." The emissary's large eyes blinked slowly. "You have introduced a chaotic variable, a weapon that targets consciousness itself. This is not logical warfare. Who said it was warfare?" Yoon replied, "You judged our emotions as illogical. We demonstrated their function. They are a form of information. You failed to process it." On Earth, Minji watched, her heart hammering. This was the moment. The galaxy was listening. The emissary was silent for a long moment. It was clearly receiving data, consulting. Finally, it spoke again. The resonance. It contained the oculi termination event. "Yes," Yoon said, her voice hardening. "You felt it. Not as data. As it happened." Another pause. The emissary seemed to struggle with something internally. The probability of weaponization was 38%. The action was taken to preserve the greater harmony. "And what is the probability?" Yoon asked, leaning slightly toward the screen. "That humanity will now share this emotional resonance technology with every other species you have quarantined, manipulated or sterilized for the sake of your harmony. The Krath? The others we have seen in your logs? What is the probability that your cold peace will now face a galaxy of warm, furious voices you can no longer silence?" The silence from the emissary was absolute. The calculation was being made, and they could almost hear the gears grinding. The unthinkable was being thought. The probability. The emissary began, then stopped. It could not give a number. The variable was too new, too wild. Tae-seok, in the Gobi bunker, gave a thin, hard smile. "Checkmate." A new signal interrupted, a global broadcast on the original public band. The emissary's face vanished, replaced by the standard galactic consensus stream. But the usual peaceful images were gone. Instead, there was simple, clear text, scrolling in 100 different galactic languages. At the top, the human language translation read, "System-wide reclassification. Notice, species, Homo sapiens sapiens Sol 3. Prior designation, potential. Tier 3, quarantined new designation, sovereign, Tier 1, deterrent. Threat assessment, Apex, non-standard engagement profile. We, protocol, standoff, initiate diplomatic negotiations. Addendum, acknowledge emotional resonance capacity. As legitimate sentient defense mechanism, reassessment of prior xenocultural judgments pending. In the lab, someone let out a choked sob. It was Ji-Soo, the linguist. She was crying again, but this time it was a release of a pressure so immense it had shaped her bones for months. Minju stared at the words. Apex, deterrent. They were not friendly words. They were not welcoming words. They were the words of a predator recognizing another predator. They were the words of a wall being built, not to keep them in a zoo, but to keep them at a respectful distance. It was not the embrace they might have dreamed of as children looking at the stars. It was something harder, truer. It was respect, born not from kindness, but from fear. From the clear understanding of a terrible, shared cost. On the screen, Captain Yoon's face reappeared, looking at them from the Vindicator. She looked exhausted, aged, but her eyes were clear. "Mission accomplished," she said, her voice cracking just once. "They have recalculated." Weeks later, Minji stood on a balcony at the old Daedik facility. The moon's harsh landscape was bathed in sunlight. The great ears of the array were still. They were listening to a different kind of silence now. Tae-seok joined her. He held 2 cups of real coffee, not the recycled stuff from the bunker. They drank in silence for a while, watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon, a blue and white marble against the black. It looked fragile. It looked beautiful. They didn't welcome us, Minji said finally. No, Tae-seok agreed. They won't. Not for a long time. Maybe never. We didn't show them our best art or our smartest science. We showed them our darkest fury. They will always remember the scream. Minji nodded, taking a sip. The coffee was bitter, but good. But they heard it. And they will leave us alone. They will talk. On our terms. They saw our fire, Tae-seok said, looking at the distant Earth. And instead of trying to put it out, they have decided to just give it a very, very wide berth. A new signal came in, not from the stars, but from Earth. It was a request for them to return. To help build the first human embassy for the new, wary, diplomatic talks with a scared galaxy. Minji turned from the view. The stars were still there, but they were different now. They were no longer just lights. They were eyes watching carefully from a safe distance. And humanity was no longer a child in a crib. They were the thing in the dark that had finally roared back. It was not a happy ending. It was a hard beginning. But it was theirs. They had bought it with the one currency the universe finally understood. A fury so deep, so dark, and so powerfully alive that it could not be ignored.